Good afternoon. What happened in the past, that means in last week's Torah portion, was the Mishkan, the Tabernacle, the portable sanctuary in the desert was dedicated. And the way it was dedicated, that each day, from the day that it was erected, a leader of one of the 12 tribes would bring a special offering. And the Torah describes the offering: one silver bowl, its weight 130 shekels, one silver basin of 70 shekels, both of them filled with fine flour mixed with oil for a meal offering, one gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense, one young bull, one ram, one sheep, one he-goat, one for a sin offering, and for a peace offering, 2 cattle, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, 5 sheep in their first year. This is the offering of Nachshon. That was the first leader. And then every day another leader brought the identical offering. All these details that I just read, the leader of another tribe brought the exact same offering, and then the third day, a third leader brought the exact same offering, and the fourth day, and the fifth day, all the way up to the 12th day. There are 12 tribes. So each one of the leaders of the 12 tribes brought this elaborate offering to dedicate the new sanctuary. Now, the 12 how do we count 12 tribes? Jacob had 12 sons, but one of his sons was Levi. The tribe of Levi was not included in this. So how do you get 12? If you minus one from 12, you get 11. But the tribe of Joseph was divided into 2. When Jacob blessed Joseph, he said, "Your 2 sons will be like my 2 sons." So there's really 13 tribes. But we never say 13, we always say 12. Why? Because we count 12 without Levi when we're dealing with the inheritance of the land of Israel. Primarily, when you're dealing with that subject, the tribe of Levi did not get a share in the land of Israel. They were given cities, but they didn't get territory the way the other 12 tribes were given. But instead, Joseph's 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, they got 2 different portions of the land, of the inheritance. When we talk about the Jewish people in general, we talk about Joseph as one tribe, and Levi is included in the number of 12. So when the count in the dedication of the Mishkan, dedication of the temple, 12 tribes were represented, but it excluded the tribe of Levi. Now Levi was the elite tribe. They were the priests. The leader of the tribe of Levi was Aaron. He was their leader. He was the first Kohen, the first priest. He and his sons. And then from there on, their descendants are the priests to this day. If you see a Kohen and you test his DNA, you will see that he's part of a genetic chain going all the way back to Aaron. It's an unbroken chain to make him a Kohen. And Aaron was not included in that process of dedicating the Mishkan, the sanctuary. So and that's where this week's Torah portion picks up. And God speaks to Moses, saying, "Speak to Aaron and say to him, when you kindle the lamps, the menorah, toward the face of the menorah shall the 7 lamps cast light." And Aaron did so. Toward the face of the menorah he kindled its lamps, as God had commanded Moses. And it goes on to describe the menorah. The menorah was made out of gold, hammered out from gold, from its base to its flower. It is hammered out. According to the vision that God showed Moses, so did he make the menorah. That's how this Torah portion begins. So Rashi says, what's the juxtaposition over here? Why is it that after it tells about the 12 tribes bringing the offerings, why does it pick up with God telling Moses to say to Aaron that he should light the menorah, he should kindle the menorah? So Rashi says, because when Aaron saw how the leaders of the tribes dedicated the sanctuary, he felt bad. He was dejected. Why? Because he was not included in the dedication. Neither he or his tribe, the tribe of Levi, was not part of this. So he felt dejected. Why am I excluded? Am I chopped liver? Rashi doesn't use the words chopped liver. I made that up. So God says to him, continue in Rashi's commentary, God says, by your life, I swear, your share will be greater than theirs, because you're going to kindle and prepare the lamps of the menorah. End of the quote from Rashi. So what was going on over here? What seemed to be happening was Aaron had a history that was problematic. Aaron participated in the construction of the golden calf. And not only he participated in it, he created it in a way, because he asked the people to contribute their jewelry, which they did, and he threw it into the fire, and out came a golden calf. So in some sense, and in a major sense, Aaron was implicated in the terrible transgression of the golden calf, worse than which no other transgression ever occurred. How could people, after 40 days hearing God speak to them directly, don't have any other gods, and they create a golden calf and worship it? True, not everyone did. It's only a select few people compared to the majority of the people who did not. But the majority of the people allowed it to happen. No one protested it. The only one who protested it was Aaron's and Moses' nephew, Hur. I think we discussed this once before. And he was murdered by the people who instigated for the golden calf. But Aaron, nevertheless, was a participant. And what was God's way of showing that he had forgiven the people? By telling Moses to tell the people to build a sanctuary. And when God had the sanctuary built and he was able to express his presence through the sanctuary, God revealed himself through the sanctuary, that was the sign that God had completely forgiven the people. And God says, I'm willing to live amongst you. I'm willing to come back to live with you. So the building of the sanctuary was the sign that God had totally forgiven the people. All of a sudden, Aaron finds himself out of the process. He's not invited to be given a role in dedicating the Mishkan, the Tabernacle, sanctuary, whatever name you want to call it. I'll call it Mishkan. That's the Hebrew word, and that's hard to translate. Sanctuary would be the best translation, not tabernacle. Tabernacle is an English word, but most people know the Hebrew more than they know the English. That's like there are a lot of other words like that. Like in the beginning of Genesis, it talks about the sky. It uses the Hebrew word rakia, and it's translated as the firmament. I don't know anyone who speaks English as their only language who ever heard of the word firmament, unless you read the translation, the King James translation. Likewise, tefillin that men put on is translated as phylacteries. Most people who know anything about it will call it tefillin, never heard the word phylactery. So a lot of English biblical words are a little hard to use, because they don't really tell you much about it. So anyhow, we'll use the word Mishkan. So here Aaron is excluded from bringing a dedicatory offering to the Mishkan. Not only he, but his tribe as well. So he felt terrible, because what did that mean to him? In his mind, it meant, you know what? God forgave the people, but not me. Everyone else was forgiven. I'm excluded. I am still considered guilty for that terrible sin, and maybe God will never forgive me. But he felt doubly bad, because he says, my tribe was also not included. Maybe God is angry at me, but why is he angry at my tribe? So it's because of me that the entire tribe of Levi is being excluded. So that seems to be the simple understanding why Aaron felt bad. But there are many, many questions that can be asked over here. And the answer that your role is greater than theirs. You're going to light the menorah. How does that answer his question? Why does that make him feel better that he's going to be lighting the menorah? So one way of understanding that is every leader of every tribe focuses on his tribe. Your job is, if you're the governor of a state, your job is to be responsible for your state. You don't get involved in other states unless it pertains to your own state. That's what the job of a governor is. A president, his job is, even though he comes from one state, his job is not just that one state. His job is the entire country. His focus is on everyone. The same thing over here. Aaron, in his humility, thought that he was like any other tribe. He was one of 12 tribes, one of 13 tribes, if you divide Joseph into two. And his role is like a governor. And when he looked at every other leader of every other tribe bringing an offering, and his tribe was excluded, in his mind that meant my tribe is inferior. And why is it inferior? Because I'm its leader. And there's an expression of the Talmud that a generation follows its leader, and the leader follows the generation. You get what you deserve. If people criticize their leaders, they have to point the criticism to themselves. We deserve what we get. So Aaron felt my tribe is considered to be inferior to all the other tribes. What he didn't realize is, on the contrary, his tribe was superior. He was the president. He was like the president in the sense that he was responsible for all the people, and likewise his tribe was given a special role to inspire the entire Jewish nation, not just one tribe. And where do we see that Aaron's role was to inspire everyone? By lighting up the menorah. What is the significance? What is this symbolism in the menorah? The menorah had 7 branches. Why 7 branches? So you could say, if it would have 8, you would say why 8? If it had 6, you would ask why 6? 7 is a nice number, but no, it's not just a nice number. 7 represents the different emotional traits that we all possess. The Kabbalists, the teachings of Kabbalah, talk about how every one of us has 7 emotional traits, so that there are 7 prototypes of individuals, even though there were 12 tribes, but there's a more basic division into 7, like the way that they're enumerated is the first of the 7 traits is the trait of chesed, kindness, love. The second one is the trait of gevura, judgment, rigidity, discipline, fear, and likewise the other 5 represent different attitudes, different mindsets, different emotional makeup. And Aaron lighting the menorah, his job was to kindle and ignite the souls of all the Jewish people, and not only one prototype, one approach, but all 7 approaches. So every time he lit the menorah, he wasn't just lighting a menorah, he was igniting the souls of all of the people. So what he did was much more fundamental than what the other leaders. They were leaders of their respective tribes. That's great, that's wonderful. And God is telling Aaron, you're not in part of that because your role is much greater than their role. The Torah then says, and Aaron did as he was told. So again, Rashi, quoting earlier sources, says, what is the Torah trying to tell us over here? That Aaron did so. It's to tell us the praise of Aaron, that he did not alter, he did not change. Simply it means that Aaron did exactly as he was told. He was told to light the menorah, and he did it. And dozens of commentators are baffled by this statement. Why would anyone think that Aaron would do the opposite of what he was told? Yeah, God wants me to light 7 lights, 7 lamps of the menorah. I'll light 6 and let someone else light the 7th. Would he think he would do a thing like that? Or it says over here that the flame should face the center. The wicks were adjusted that they would face the center. And would you think Aaron would say, you know what? God said it, I'll do it that way. I'll do it a different way. Why would anyone think that Aaron would do things differently? So there are many different answers to that question. I'll share some of them. One answer, which is not the simple answer, is that when it says he didn't alter, he didn't change, it doesn't mean that he didn't alter his instructions. It means he didn't change. What do you mean he didn't change? When someone is chosen to be the head honcho, when someone is chosen to be the one to inspire the entire Jewish nation, that he was superior to everyone, if someone tells you you're superior to everyone, and you have a role that's more important, that will make you change, make you feel better about yourself, and make you feel that I'm special, more special than everyone else. Yes, we're all special, but some people feel they're more special. Aaron was so humble, it didn't affect him. It didn't cause him to change. He was as humble as he was before. This was not going to change his personality. Another explanation given, and it was given by a great Hasidic rabbi whose own personality was very much in tune with Aaron. What was Aaron's famous maxim? In Ethics of the Fathers, Aaron is said to be someone who loved peace, who pursued peace, loved everyone. He loved people not because of their qualities, but because he just loved humanity. He just loved everyone. He was consumed with love. He was like a walking heart. Well, the rabbi who gave this explanation that I'm going to give you was Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev. He passed away at about 1810, I think. He was one of the most famous Hasidic leaders, and he too was known for his love. And he was so passionate that he got so excited. Whenever he had to do a mitzvah, he became so emotional. He couldn't control his emotions. He would tremble. He would go haywire because he was so emotional. This man was a brilliant man. He wasn't just a heart; he was a brain as well. But his heart defined him. And there are many stories told about how he loved God, he loved the Torah, he loved the commandments, he loved every person. It consumed him. The story is told that he couldn't fall asleep the night of the holiday, because in the night of Sukkot, in the morning we have a mitzvah to take a lulav, a palm branch, and the etrog, the four species, and we make a blessing on it. You do that only during that holiday. He was so eager to do it, he couldn't sleep all night. He just couldn't fall asleep. The end of Yom Kippur, this is shortly before he passed away, and he was very, very weak, and he fasted the whole Yom Kippur, 26 hours. And after the end of the fast, he said, "I'm so thirsty." So they quickly ran to the kitchen, they brought him a glass of water, and he just ignored it. He was sitting and opened up a volume of the Talmud that deals with the upcoming holiday of Sukkot. So they just left the water there. An hour later, they hear him say, I'm so thirsty. And they ran, they brought him another glass of water. They saw he didn't touch the first one. And this repeated itself all night long until he finished the whole volume of the Talmud. And the next morning, he hadn't touched any food or any drink. They asked him, "You said you were thirsty, you didn't even drink the water." He says, "I was thirsty for the Torah. The 24-6 hours I was praying, and I didn't have an opportunity to study God's Torah, and I was just thirsty for that." And he ignored his own thirst. This is the type of emotional person he was. So this is how he explained Rashi's comment that Aaron didn't change anything. He said Aaron was such an emotional person that if you're told to take oil, pour it into the lamps, because the menorah used oil, If it would have been me, I don't know if he actually said these words, but I'm putting these words in his mouth, I would have gotten the oil spilled all over the place. I would have been trembling with so much emotion, I could never have done anything right. And Aaron's greatness was that even though he was such an emotional person and he approached every spiritual thing with tremendous feeling and fervor and excitement and enthusiasm, he didn't mess up at all. He didn't change anything. He did everything exactly as he was told, because he was able to control his emotions when it came to doing what God had commanded him to do. I like to suggest another explanation that ties in with what I said before, that the difference between Aaron and the other tribes and the leaders of the other tribes is that they were concerned with their tribe separately. They were not focused on the entire nation, because that was not their role. Aaron's role, on the other hand, was to focus on the entire nation, not on his own parochial interest, not on his own tribe. Now, Aaron could have had a thought in his mind, you know what? I'm the one who's bringing this offering. I could think in my mind whatever I want. I'm going to focus on my tribe. Put more emphasis on my own tribe, because that's natural for a person to think more about his own. You think more about your own family than you think about strangers, and that's not a bad thing necessarily. So Aaron could have said, I'm going to focus on my tribe, but rather he didn't change. The Hebrew word not changing is used in the Talmud to mean not changing your thought processes. He didn't alter his thought process to think of his own individual parochial interest. He was totally devoted to the mission that he is the one to inspire everyone, and everyone equally. And that was something that was unique about Aaron. Now, when the Torah tells Aaron to light the menorah, it sounds like the lighting of the menorah is the function of a Kohen, of a priest, as is the function of bringing the sacrifices in the temple. If I'm in the temple and I want to offer a sacrifice on the altar, I would be guilty of a capital crime. I'm not a Kohen. Only a Kohen is allowed to approach the altar in the temple. Not even a Levi. The Levi is the second. The Levi can't do it either. The Levi had other functions. The Levi would sing, they would open the gates, they would stand guard, but they couldn't bring the offerings. Yeah.
Well, Moses' people were the Levi?
Moses was a Levi, yes.
Okay.
But he wasn't the only one. Except for Aaron and his sons and their descendants, all the rest of the people of the tribe of Levi were Levites, Leviim. And a Levi cannot bring the sacrifice. So here it seems that Aaron was the only one, Aaron and then his descendants, who likewise were a Kohen, were the only ones to light the menorah. The Torah makes it clear that Aaron did it. Yet the Talmud says that lighting the menorah is an exception to the rule. Anyone can light the menorah. You don't have to be a Kohen to light the menorah. You had to be a Kohen to prepare the menorah, to put in the oil, to put in the wick, to facilitate the lighting, but anyone can light the menorah. So then how does that reconcile with the fact that the Torah over here says that Aaron had to do it? So one of the answers to that question is there's a difference between lighting the menorah the first time and subsequent times. When the first time you do something, it's dedicating the service. It's more than just following a pattern, following a routine. You are now dedicating something, and when you dedicate something, you have to infuse it with much more light, with much more warmth, with much more power, much more energy, much more enthusiasm and excitement and fervor than the times that you do it subsequently. because the same thing is true with the Jewish education. The greatest of the rabbis would always focus on the fact that children have to be given a much greater emphasis on their role. You can't, an adult could get away with some lukewarm teaching, but a child has to be shown much more excitement, much more light than someone who is already on in years, because it's like heating a building. I don't know if nowadays we still do it the same way, but in the olden days you had a boiler room in the basement, and if you went into the boiler room, it was very hot. But why do you need it that hot? You couldn't bear the heat if you would have the same heat in your apartment. But if you want the rest of the building to be warm, the boiler room has to be hot. And a locomotive, the locomotive has to be much hotter than the rest of the train. Otherwise, it's not going to pull the train. The same thing is true with the dedication of the sanctuary, of the temple, of the Mishkan. When it was dedicated, when the lighting of the menorah in particular was dedicated, it had to be done by Aaron, because he had to instill in it the power that it has, and once the power is there, you can add on more cars to the train, and it'll go with the same power. But that's why the first time they lit the menorah, it had to be Aaron. Later on, others could do it as well, although the likelihood in the temple that a non-Kohen would do it was very small, because there was a logistical problem. How do you light the menorah? The menorah was in the sanctuary itself. If you're not a Kohen, you couldn't enter the sanctuary. So there were two ways. Maimonides explains there were two ways that you can have a non-Kohen lighted. One was to take the menorah out of the sanctuary, light it, and put it back in again, which was something they would never really want to do. And the other way is to have a long stick, and it had to be very, very long in the temple in Jerusalem, and light it from that one. And that would be very awkward, and most likely wouldn't be done. So in practice, the Kohen did it. Although he didn't, it could be anyone. The Kohen had to do it because of practical reasons. Now, when the Torah tells us to light the menorah, it uses the expression "behalotecha." In Hebrew, the word for kindling is "behadlikacha," when you kindle. Here it uses another term, "behalotecha." The root of "behalotecha" is when you raise up. When you raise up the flames. That's a little bit of an unusual way of saying when you light it, when you kindle it, when you ignite it. It could have just said "behadlikcha," when you light it. So Rashi, again, the primary commentator of the Torah is Rashi, who lived in the 11th century. He passed away in the early 11th century, in 1105. So Rashi says that the reason why it uses this expression, when you light it up, when you raise it up, is because you have to make sure that the flame goes up on itself. When you light the menorah, it should light by itself. What does that mean? It means that you shouldn't have to constantly come and rekindle it and put more oil in it and tweak the wick, because that's what happens when you light a oil lamp. You have to make sure there's enough oil. You have to make sure that the wick is the right size, and the wick can sometimes fall into the oil. You have to keep on tweaking it. No. Make sure when you light it that it can burn on its own. There's no need for anyone to be there. What's the significance of that? What's the lesson there? The lesson is, and the Rebbe emphasized this many times, is that when it comes to helping others, inspiring others, teaching others, you have to do it in a way where the person's flame doesn't constantly have to be readjusted. And this refers us to Ethics of the Fathers, which is customary to study during these days. The Ethics of the Fathers records the teachings of the men of the Great Assembly. These were the sages who lived at the beginning of the Second Temple era. They composed the prayers They were like the spiritual leaders. There were a total of 120 of these men of the Great Assembly. And what was their favorite maxim? They said three things. They said, be very deliberate in judgment, establish many students, and make a fence around the Torah. So what exactly does this mean? So the simple understanding is that he's talking to judges, because rabbis primarily are judges. Most people think rabbis are primarily like priests. No, they're not priests. You don't have to be a priest to be a rabbi. Most rabbis are not priests. A priest is someone who's a functionary who works in the temple. And many of the priests were not rabbis, and many of the rabbis were not priests. They're two different classes, two different categories. Although many of the priests were great rabbis in their own right, and many of them were prophets. Jeremiah was a priest, and others. Samuel was a Levi.
Oh, Ephraim. His father was from Ephraim, right?
What? No, he was a Levi.
Samuel's father?
No, Samuel's was a Levi.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought it said, who's Hannah's husband?
Elkanah, yeah. He was a Levi, yeah. So a rabbi was not a Kohen, but some people say, well, a rabbi is a teacher, which is true. But the main function of rabbis, and to this day in many communities, is that he's a judge of Jewish law. If you have a question of Jewish law, the rabbi is the one who's trained to answer the question. Whether it's ritual laws, the laws concerning the Sabbath, concerning kosher, whether it's business laws, whether it's laws about, how to get along with your neighbors, whatever issues come to the fore, the rabbi is there to be a judge. And now not as much as it used to be, but in those days that was the primary function of a rabbi. He was there to judge. So this is the admonition to judges. Be deliberate in judgment. Be deliberate. Don't be hasty to render a decision. A judge might say to himself, you know what, I had this case 10 years ago, and this is the verdict that I issued. I'll just issue the same verdict. No, be careful. Maybe the circumstances are different. Maybe there's some details that change the whole picture. So you have to be deliberate in judgment. Then you have to have many students, because that's how the Sanhedrin worked in those days. Every community had to have at least one court of 23 judges. And the way it worked was you had 23 judges, and then you also had 23 students. And if one of the judges died or moved away or whatever, and there's now a vacancy, the leading student would take the 23rd position of the court. And the students would all be there in every court case. That's how they would learn. They would learn from the court cases. So you have to have many students because you need to prepare for the next generation. And then make a fence around the Torah. That the Torah has laws, but in order to protect those laws, you're supposed to create other laws to safeguard the original ones. There are many examples of that. We're not allowed on Shabbat. We're not allowed to handle certain things. We can't handle the phone on Shabbat. There's nothing in the Bible that says you can't handle a phone, but it's a fence around the law, because if you handling the phone could lead to other transgressions of the Shabbos. I'm not going to go into details. You can't ride a horse on Shabbos, because riding a horse is in and of itself innocent, but you might pull off a branch from a tree, which is a violation of the laws of Shabbos, in order to to whip the horse. And there are many, hundreds of examples, thousands of examples of that. So you have to create fences around the Torah. So the Rebbe took this teaching and applied it to a teacher, because every teacher is also a judge. And by extension, we can apply it to every person, because believe it or not, we are all judges of people. If someone's going to walk in the door that we never saw before, what are we going to be doing? we're going to be sizing that person, friend or foe, first of all. Is that person, do we want to have that person in this room? Is the person able to understand what we're talking about? Does the person speak English? I mean, we judge people every time we see someone, we judge them. And even if we know the person, we're constantly judging them. Maybe they changed, maybe this, maybe that. So the message here is to judges, literally people who are judges. The message is to teachers who are very much in the business of judging students. And the message is to every one of us, because we're also judges. So the first message is be very deliberate in judgment. Be deliberate. Don't draw conclusions just by seeing a person one time, seeing them casually. You can't determine a person's nature just by one judgment, just by one overview of that person. You have to be very deliberate, because maybe that person had a bad day and they behaved in a certain way that was not nice. Maybe that doesn't define that person. Maybe the person is the most wonderful person. They just happened to have a terrible day, and it just, there's a famous, I don't know, maybe it's not so famous, but I heard the story a long time ago, that this is late at night, and this father is on a subway in New York. The subway is basically empty, and someone else was on the same train, same car, and the kids were carrying on, and the kids were terrible, were obnoxious, and the father wasn't really handling it, and this person was really judging this father. What a terrible father it is. He doesn't take care of his kid. It's late at night. What is he doing late at night with his kids on the subway? And really judging the person, and had every reason to think that father was really derelict. And then when he approached the father just said they just came from the funeral of his wife, the children's mother. And then the whole judgment turned over 180 degrees, because you didn't know the circumstances. So be very deliberate in judging people. A teacher should not, the first day of class, one kid is a wise guy. I know this kid. This kid is a troublemaker. I'm going to really show this kid what he's up to and put him in his place. And that kid could be a wonderful kid, but you misjudge the person because you were hasty. So be very deliberate in judgment. I'm still going to show how it connects to what we were talking about before. The second teaching is the key one. Establish many students. A teacher who has to be very careful in judging and has to be very deliberate in judging might say, in that case, I can't have too many students. If I have to really put such an emphasis on evaluating every student for what they are, what their potential is, what their problems are, what their assets are, what their qualities are, I'm never going to be able to teach anything, because I'm going to be busy judging very, very deliberately, very carefully, and that's going to take a lot of time. So I can't have many students. So the answer is establish, literally, I'm going to translate literally, stand up many students. It doesn't say teach many students. Stand them up. What does that mean? Get them to stand on their own 2 feet. Teach them the skills. Prepare them so they could stand on their own, which is exactly the same lesson as we just said before. Light the candles, or the lamps of the menorah, in a way that the flames burn on their own. You don't have to keep on going over to it and rekindling it, adding oil, adjusting the wick. Make sure that you bring them up, that they're able to stand on their own 2 feet and they're able to take care of themselves. That in that way, you don't have the limit that I don't have time for so many students. You don't need that much time compared to what you would need if you have to keep on being there and breathing down to every student's neck. You have the ability to establish them that they can stand on their own 2 feet. And then the person might think, if I have to have so many students, that means I have to take in students who might not be the most receptive, who might not be the best students. So I'm going to relax the standards. That's what happens in society today. When the schools, the educators, the so-called educators, have relaxed the standard. Well, we can't really give them tests because they're not going to do well on the test. And you relax the standards, you're left with nothing. So the Ethics of the Father says the opposite. Make the standards even higher, make them even more rigid. Create fences around the law. Add on new restrictions. Don't think you can relax standards and that's a good educational approach. But the main point over here that connects to this parsha is when you teach, when you judge people, when you have to influence people, do it in a way where you give them the skills that they can shine on their own, that they can light and illuminate on their own. And that's Aaron's responsibility. And when the Torah says he didn't change, and going back to that, what does that mean? He didn't change. He realized, he took that lesson seriously, that his job was not to literally go to every single person individually and kindle his soul. He was able to do it by lighting the menorah, and through that he was able to ignite the souls of everyone. He didn't have to change the attitude of lighting, making the flame go up on its own. He made sure that it would go up on its own.